Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leanne Palmerston from Hamilton Family Doulas.
And that's the eagle in the background. Welcome to pandemic life, people. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do.
That's right. So introduce yourself, lovely host.
Hello, everybody. My name is Meaghan Grant, and I am one of the hosts of Birth and Baby Talk. I am also one of the owners of Toronto Family Doulas, Hamilton Family Doulas, and Family Doulas of Ottawa. I have been a doula for a long time now. I'm about 8.5 years in at this point, which for a doula is pretty much ancient. We're working on changing that. That's part of what we're going to talk about today, is making this a sustainable career. And obviously I and Leanne, who's been a doula for almost twice as long as I have been, we have clearly made this a sustainable career. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to, because we're talking about being doulas and becoming doulas, I'm going to just sort of jump over Leanne, and I'm going to sort of tell my story so people can understand a little bit of like the journey to get to where I was. So you've been following along with Birth and Baby Talk. You heard me a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I guess, saying before I was a doula, I worked in early childhood education, special needs education, infant and childhood development, that sort of thing. And so when I became a mom, I thought I knew everything. And then I got smacked in the face with reality. But through sort of my pregnancy, I had a very sort of difficult end of my pregnancy, a difficult labor, an extremely difficult early postpartum where I was readmitted to the hospital. I had infections and numerous breastfeeding issues and, health concerns with both me and the baby. I really started to sort of see and value certain types of support. And I also really got a crash course in sort of mom shaming and judgment and parenting Facebook groups and all of that nastiness that we all say we don't want a part of, but let's be honest for a hot minute and admit we all participate in from time to time. But a lot of what I found when I was sort of going through all of this is doula support 8-9 years ago felt very geared to the crunchy granola moms.
Yeah.
I don't want an epidural. I don't want medical intervention. Especially at the time, it was extremely difficult to get into with midwifery collective. So, and I was the same. I didn't get a midwife, so I was assigned, I had an OB who I now love. But at the time, I was really disappointed. So it felt like a doula was an alternative, someone who could help me keep that, natural birth plan, and my breastfeeding plan and my natural parenting, all of those things. And I felt like a doula would really be able to support me. And ultimately, as wonderful as my doula was, the type of support she offered didn't end up ultimately being the type of support I needed. And what I think was, this is the buzzword, the pandemic buzzword of pivot. There was no pivot. There was no sort of, as my birth plan went totally off the rails, as my parenting plan went totally off the rails, there was no help in adjusting my perspective. And that's what I found was really lacking just in the doula community generally. And Leanne, you and I have had this conversation umpteen bajillion times over the last 8 years that we've known each other. And this is, an ongoing issue in a lot of fields, but the doula field is particularly ripe with it. And so I was at a bit of a crossroads. I didn't necessarily want to go back to doing the job that I had been doing before, but I still loved working with families and finding solutions. That was a big thing for me, is solutions, and not necessarily solving other people's problems, because, the whole give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach him how to fish, he eats forever. I didn't want solutions to be, I go in and I do a thing and it solves a problem and I leave. I really wanted to help families set themselves up for success. And that was something I saw that was also lacking in the early development field, is there wasn't as much setting families up for success. Kids, sure. Families, not so much. And I got to see the impact that had. So I sort of combined all of those elements, and I decided to take my first doula training. And I walked out of that training thinking I was all that and a big birth ball and more. And over time, I learned more. I found my place. I did additional trainings. But at the end of the day, for me, being a doula, being an agency owner, holding these sort of webinars and presentations where we talk about being a doula, it all comes back to that idea of finding solutions, supporting people where they're at, and really giving people the tools they need to be successful. And that's the philosophy that really, Leanne, for all of our agencies, underlines the philosophy of care that we provide our clients. It underlines our philosophy when we're hiring new doulas, which, hey, everybody, to all three of our agencies are currently looking for postpartum doulas to join the team. That's part of why we're doing this today. And I have to admit, well, I guess it's been 7 years since we met Leanne. It was at a business training that we met. And Leanne was this terrifying, very intimidating. She'd been in the field forever, and she was this amazing doula, and I was this newbie who was like sitting in the back of the room connected to a breast pump for 8 hours because my baby was like 6 weeks old. And I was so nervous to meet Leanne because she was this big figure in sort of the local community and sort of doula scene in the GTA. And then I met Leanne, and Leanne is Leanne, and everybody loves Leanne, and I didn't have to be intimidated anymore. And then we went into business together. So, it was a fairly quick journey, but we connected both in the training and as owners, and we really, why we merged was this idea that I mentioned at the beginning of making doula work sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, and again, solution finding. And that's where we really bonded. And that's part of today. Because this is a career that can be sustainable. This is a career that you can do long-term. And you don't have to be an agency owner. Not everybody wants to be a business owner, and that's okay. But there are ways to do this job long-term. And all of our agencies have doulas who have worked for us for much longer than the typical doula lifespan, in part because of the tools that we try to give them in order to make this job sustainable. So now that I've rambled for a good couple of minutes there about me and why I love sort of bringing new doulas in this industry, Leanne.
So yeah, I came to doula work because I had already started attending births, and back in the day too, doula work was synonymous with birth support. So I had attended the births of the first 2 of my nieces to be born. And I felt when I was in those spaces, like I wasn't a doula yet, didn't even know what one was. When I was at the hospital with my 2 different sisters supporting them, I felt like I kind of knew, like I had a gut feeling for what was going on. I felt like I could understand and analyze the situation and help in a real practical way, both in a physical sense and an emotional sense, because the process of birthing is not just physically stressful, it's emotionally stressful. And I also really loved, both of my sisters had midwives, and I really liked the feeling of camaraderie that we had as a team supporting the birthing person. And I just, at the time, I had a very small child, and I was at a local park knitting away, and a fellow knitting mother came over and said, "Are you knitting socks?" And we became fast friends. And as we were talking, and she said, "What do you do?" I came from a background in business communications. I had worked for years in a corporate setting as a writer, a business writer. And I was also a part-time journalist, and had been for a decade. And I said, like this working with infants and parents really inspired me, and knowing from inside, becoming a parent, how difficult and challenging it was, and how little support there was for that nitty gritty, everyday kind of stuff, the hard stuff, not necessarily the hard part of like parenting, but that middle of the night lonely stuff that very few people really talk about. And my friend said, "Oh, it sounds like, you are like a doula." And I was like a what? And when she explained what it was, I was like, "Oh my goodness, that's a job. Like, that's genius." So I literally went home from the park that day with my knitted socks and my little tiny son, and I started researching what a doula was, how to become a doula. I connected to a few doulas in my community who were incredibly supportive of my joining the community. And I got trained, and I was lucky enough to train both here for like my very first training was postpartum support. And my second training was a doula training, and that training took place on a sort of mythical place in the world called the Farm, which is a commune where a very famous regenerative midwifery. I feel like that's, some people call her a Renaissance woman, but like she, Ina May Gaskin is a lay midwife who started practicing out of a need for her community to have birth attendants. And she sort of helped regenerate the modern midwifery community in the United States and beyond. And it was a really cool place to be. And I realized Ina May is also slightly problematic. And I was hanging out with a whole bunch of aging hippies, and that was a pretty cool thing to do too. And I came home.
You would fit in with a whole bunch of hippies.
I felt comfortable down there in the backwoods of Tennessee.
I feel like you with a bunch of aging hippies would be like you finding your people.
So whenever Ina May has, or whenever the community has doulas come into it, or midwifery students, etc., usually if she's available, Ina May, because she is a famous author and she has a bit of cult of personality around her, she loves to give a talk about the history of that midwifery community, and that regeneration of midwifery in the United States. And I was sitting on the floor beside her, knitting away on socks, as one does. And one of the other original midwives from that community said, "Hey, Ina, check this out. She's knitting socks, but she's knitting them from the toe up." And at that, I fell in love with them at that moment. I was like, these girls are cool. They talked about porn and stuff. Like, they were like just some old chicks who were like real cool. So anyway, I came home from that. Yeah, it's me all over the place. That's what I'm going to be when I'm old.
It's kind of funny. It's certainly not a requirement to work in this field, but there are so many doulas who are knitters. So many knitting doulas. And I bet you have to bag.
Yeah, I just recently told a client, I said, "Oh, so you're getting an epidural? Then I'm going to for sure have some knitting in my bag for when you decide to do that." But more importantly, I came home from that training really inspired, and I started my first business, which was called Hamilton Birth Revolution, and then didn't get a client for a little while, and then thought, maybe I should look at this more like a serious business. And from that moment on, I was off to the races. So that was 16 years ago. And I have been a doula. I have served on my provincial organization's board. I have been a trainer of doulas, traveling around North America to train people to be birth doulas, to be postpartum doulas, and to be infant feeding specialists as well. which is something I really loved doing. And now in the modern world, when traveling doesn't happen much, I am here supporting, like focusing on supporting families in the greater Hamilton area, and with Meaghan and our other owners who make up a 4-person management team. And I think we're all in agreement that what we're doing is just basically trying to make people's lives better. We're just not necessarily easy, but we're trying to take the biggest points of stress out of people's lives by providing support. We're listening to parents and listening to what they're telling us are their pain points, and we're trying to help them find solutions to them while holding them in a nurturing way. As Meaghan said, all 3 of our agencies right now are in need of postpartum doulas to do work, particularly overnight work. And I've heard some extended family, when I've met them, make comments like, "So what exactly do you do all night?" And I say, "Well, I take care of the baby so that the parents can sleep." And they say, "Yeah, but I mean, if you're only feeding and diapering the baby like 3 or 4 times a night, is that really that big a deal? And by golly, if you have only ever gotten 4 or 5 hours of sleep a day for months on end, and you only got that 4 or 5 hours by sleeping in 1-hour chunks, maybe, then I'm pretty sure you can understand intuitively the value of having someone there to just take everything over for you for a little while, so that, during the daytime, you can be the amazing parent that you want to be, by just getting a little extra help overnight." So that kind of thing really excites me. And I really love stripping away any of the kind of woo and any of the societal expectations that are placed on parents, and the weird, unsubstantiated advice that is given to people that ends up not being helpful. I really love trying to sweep that all away and just drive into the core of what's going on with families, and just helping them feel like they're great at what they do.
And just because I kind of want everybody who is watching or will watch this in the future to really be able to sort of, if this is something you thought of doing, I want you to be able to see yourself in this role. Leanne and I both sort of, in telling our stories, we said, we became doulas after we had kids. Now, our partner, Alex Weinberger, she's not here today, mostly because 3 people on steam here gets a little chaotic. But Alex does not have children, and Alex has been a doula for, I want to say, about 12 or 13 years now. So Alex, again, she's in this field a really long time. It's a job she's been able to make sustainable, but she doesn't have children. She didn't come to this from that place. She came to this from a very different pathway. You don't have to be a mom to be a doula. You might want to be a mom in the future. You may not be able to have children. You may not want children. All of that is fine. Just because you don't want your own baby doesn't mean you don't want to help other people with theirs. That is a perfectly legitimate approach to doula work. I'm not going to lie. Now that my kids, don't need diapers and sleep through the night and feed and entertain themselves, I really like being able to hand a baby back to their parents at the end of my shift. And I love what I do, and I love working with babies and families. But I'll be honest, it's nice to be able to hand the baby back and go home and know that I don't have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so you don't have to be a parent to be a doula. You do not have to be a woman to be a doula. You do not have to be straight to be a doula. You don't have to be anything to be a doula. Doulas come in all shapes and sizes, orientations, backgrounds, languages. It's a very wide field. It needs some diversification. We definitely want to see more doulas of color, disabled doulas, LGBTQ doulas, people who represent every walk of life, because people from every walk of life have babies.
That's right. Absolutely.
Right? So you don't have to fit a certain mold. I joke on a regular basis that someone is going to come by any day now and take away my crunchy doula card, because I am the least crunchy doula I think I have ever met in my life. And I work in this field, so I meet a lot of doulas. You know, you don't have to fit a mold. And if you think there's a mold, break it. You know, being a doula is, if you break it, I always break it down and boil it down to, we are there to read the room and respond.
Mm-hmm.
If you can walk into a room, even if you don't really know everybody who's there, and you can figure out the emotional undercurrents, you can see who sort of the power players are in the room, you can see who's uncomfortable, you have an instinct for, this isn't going to go the way we think it was going to go. All of those are the skills that a doula uses every day. And I'll be honest, I mean, Leanne is a trainer, Alex was a trainer, Alex is a trainer. I've sat in on dozens of doula trainings at this point. This is the stuff you can't teach.
Yeah.
This is the person. This is who you are. Doulas were doulas long before they took their training. They're the people that that all of their friends, not even just their best friend, all of their friends call. They're the ones who, you know, you're the one that everybody can cry on your shoulder. You're the one who always has, you know, a piece of advice. You're the one who always steps in to help. You're the one who always drops off a meal when somebody is sick or just had a baby. We can't teach that kind of stuff. We can't teach instinctive compassion. We can't teach people to be able to really read body language. You can, but you have a skill for it or you don't. And those are the people who are the most successful doulas, the ones who can really connect quickly. Some of the hardest but most, I'll say, rewarding clients I've ever worked with are clients I had no prenatal meetings with.
Mm-hmm.
The calls where you're like, I'm in labor and this is way harder than I think it is. If I send you money, will you send me a person? You know, those are the phone calls where you go in and you barely know a name or you know very little about what's happening, but you can quickly establish a bond and a relationship because you're that kind of person. You're someone people feel is trustworthy and they can open up to you. So you don't have to have all of these magic doula unicorn skills. That stuff can be trained. How to swaddle, how to burp, feeding bottles, all of that is trainable, but we can't train personalities and we can't train sort of natural skill sets. So what we're really looking for, even for overnights where you don't necessarily have as much interaction with parents, you still need to be able to walk into a home and parents still need to feel comfortable handing their baby over to you and leaving the room. Yes. And that is a huge moment of trust.
Yeah.
It's enormous. And I'll tell you, it is the best feeling in the world when a client trusts you like that. Yeah. Because you've done your job. You've made them feel at ease and you have made them feel safe, both with you and with their baby. So we're really, you know, when you're looking at becoming a doula, all of the people who are watching, we hope that you're watching this because you're thinking about becoming a doula. And, you know, if that is how you would describe yourself, if that's how your friends would describe you, and you love babies, because if you do not enjoy being with babies, but you have all those skills, you're still not going to be a great doula. But if you love babies, if you love families, if you really like that sort of problem solving, and I hate the word empowerment. It's so overused in our field. But if you really like sort of that feeling of giving people their own confidence, that's really when people thrive in this role. And when they are able to make it sustainable because they can really create those interactions with clients in a sustainable manner. So, you know, you don't have to be a certain type of person to be a doula. You know, Leanne, we have seen this. We've seen everything from like the stereotypical doula to someone who's in tattoos from head to toe to male doulas to, you know, and everything in between. So we have certainly seen a lot of differences in this field, and it's fabulous because really a lot of birthing people are looking for someone they identify with. So the more kinds of people we have in the field, the more families are going to experience the phenomenal support that a doula can provide.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I've definitely co-signed that sense of like the right person to be a doula is someone who has a feeling that they'd like to nurture other people, and that they also have a little intuitive sense about what's going on with other people. So if you feel like you're a bit of an empath, if you feel like you have a good intuitive sense about like what people's emotions are without them telling you those, that's a fantastic like foundation to start with, because yeah, you can learn the specific physical skills like how to do things, and you can also learn about how to approach your clients in a philosophical sense. But yeah, this is a great job for people who are really satisfied when they can walk into a space and just very with some simple words and phrases completely turn the feeling in the room around. Someone who is patient and can listen as well is a really great skill, because a lot of the work in what we do is in allowing our clients to open themselves up and be vulnerable with us. So you need to be able to sit back and take yourself out of the situation a little and just listen and listen for what's going on, and letting people be themselves. And then, you know, in time, you start to learn how to draw that out from people and facilitate those discussions really well, so that they'll give you their own solutions. You don't have to offer solutions. In fact, a lot of people don't, they may say they want someone to come and fix things, but they often don't want someone to fix things. They want someone to be a kind and compassionate ear while they just talk about how they're having trouble fixing their own situation. So I think those are like all some good skills and stuff. What does it look like to be a postpartum doula? You might be wondering. So we generally at all of our agencies kind of split postpartum doulas into daytime doula work and nighttime doula work. So during the day, you might be doing work more closer to kind of coaching parents in new parenting. So you're often there to help with feeding. If a family is learning how to breastfeed, you're there to kind of help them along the way. And of course, your trainings give you that information to allow you to help people with those things. You're certainly not expected to fix breastfeeding problems, but you will learn the skills to kind of help people improve their techniques and help them identify when a problem sounds like it's big enough to like go get some specialized support. Because that's another thing that doulas do. Doulas are really good at knowing when they've reached their limitation of knowledge and either finding the information for clients or referring them to the appropriate people. That's an incredibly important skill. And when we see doulas not do that, then like, you know, we know you're trying too hard to do things you're not qualified yet to do. So, and that's we think it's really important to be able to recognize your own professional boundaries. So you may be doing things like that. You may be doing some infant care so that the main parent, the parent who is doing the bulk of the caregiving duties, can maybe go get a nap, can go get a really good long shower, can sit down and eat a meal without having to worry if their baby is going to cry in a couple of minutes, because they have a trusted person there who can attend to those needs. You may also do a little domestic support in the form of making someone some lunch or a breakfast or a cup of coffee that they can sit and drink while it's still hot.
The first time. hot the first time.
Exactly. As well as maybe doing a little bit of laundry. I'm only too happy to sit and fold some towels on the sofa while we sit and chat while, a client is breastfeeding their baby. That's what sometimes being a doula looks like. And then there's nighttime doula work. Meaghan, why don't you tell us a little bit about how nighttime doula work is a little different?
I have been doing an overnight contract since the fall, and I'll be totally honest here. As an agency owner, obviously I've got 3 agencies plus the birth and baby talk that, I'm working on at all times. So I actually stopped doing a lot of postpartum work a year or so ago. Well, I guess a year before the pandemic. Yeah. I kind of feel like 2020 just didn't happen.
I know.
So, I had sort of stepped back from that role. I'd even stepped back to just doing repeat birth clients simply because, as you know, Leanne, we have a lot on our plates in other forums. But with all of the things that were happening, it just, in this particular instance, made sense for me to come on and be part of the contract. And I will also say I only work overnight for postpartum. I love working overnights. And it's the same reason, I love that 2 a.m. feed with both of my kids. It's quiet. There's no one else around. It's this very peaceful time with just you and a baby. And it might be you and a screaming baby. I mean, there are definitely those nights. They happen. But when, I'll say that an overnight in a lot of ways depends on where the family is at. So this particular family, I was there the night they came home. So I was there on day 2, and then I'm there, still a few months later. And there's a huge progression in the type of support that gets offered from a newborn to a 3-month-old, for example. In the beginning, as Leanne said, if a family is planning to breastfeed, there's a lot of breastfeeding support even on overnights. And that's because in the first 6 weeks, you're really trying to build and establish someone's supply, and you're really working with them to sort of fix all of the issues that problem solve and come up with strategies or referrals for all of the things that, the little tweaks that sometimes need to be made with breastfeeding to make it successful for mom and baby. Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of support in the beginning, as well as just answering questions. What is normal? How long should I bleed for? Should my nipples look like this? All of those questions that, please don't Google any of them, but that normally people would be Googling at 3 o'clock in the morning. Those are the questions there to answer, because Google is a terrifying place and it can be hard to vet the sources, especially when you haven't slept more than an hour at a time in a couple of days. So, doulas are really there, especially in the beginning, for a lot of that educational support and really helping to establish sort of routines with the family to make family life work day and night. When we're still there, a few weeks or months later, it often transitions to a lot more baby care. This is when parents start to pump and have 1 or 2 feeds overnight, or just formula, because it doesn't make a difference for them, but they're able to introduce a bottle, and they're comfortable having the doula give 1 or 2 bottles overnight so that the parents can get, 5 hours straight of sleep, which doesn't sound like a lot right now, but when you have a new baby, that's like a week at the spa. So, I've done on overnight contracts, I've helped people with pumping, because it's not something you necessarily have time for during the day when everything is happening in your home, but now with this family in particular, it's a lot more sort of baby care. I come in every night, and there's 2 doulas involved with this family, so and both of us have the same routine. We come in and we kind of spend the first hour talking and shooting the shit a little bit. Sometimes it's about babies, sometimes it's about moms, sometimes it's about grandparents, sometimes it's about the craziness of the world right now, And there's a certain social aspect to that is particularly important right now, where parents especially are isolated, because even if they work in an essential field, they're not going to work right now. They're on maternity leave, or parental leave. So there's a social aspect that is even more important, I'd say, this time around and in this past year than maybe I would say had been important in the past. I have certainly at times had to brush up on my small talk skills because you fall out of practice when you don't see anybody. But then I take the baby up, and really for most of the night, it's the baby and I. With this child, we have the routine of like doula takes baby up, doula gives a bottle, pajamas, a book, and then baby goes to bed. And I have done everything from knitting to working on business stuff to taking a little bit of a nap in the recliner while baby sleeps. And that is something that we do allow for all of our doulas. If baby is sleeping and any other sort of little tasks parents have asked you to do, like washing bottles, that sort of thing, is done, it's okay to close your eyes. Yeah. That is part of, and just to give people sort of this idea of working as a postpartum doula, particularly one who does overnights, this can be a really good strategy and sort of career option and shift option for people who need to be at home during the day, but don't necessarily need to be right on top of kids. So for example, I could work overnight and come home and sleep for a couple of hours when I get home in the morning. And my kids are old enough that they can sign themselves into virtual school. And as long as I put like a recess snack out on the counter before I went to bed, they can sort of manage themselves for a couple of hours while I catch up on some sleep. Wouldn't work if they were like 2, but my kids are older than that, but not old enough to be by themselves. So I need to juggle being around with being able to sleep. For me, this works. I can grab a nap at the shift. I can grab a nap when I get home, and I've caught up and I can sort of jump back in. Not particularly productive the day after an overnight, but I can still be with my kids and be with my family and cook dinner and all of those things. It means that, for people whose partners are out of the home during the day, who have to go to jobs, they have the ability to sort of manage those two things, and everybody still gets their needs met. So this can be a fabulous option for people who are looking to re-enter the workforce, who need to be available to their families during the day, but are able to step back on at nighttime, and there's something else in place there. And it can be really, really good for people who are looking for not a full-time job necessarily, but want some flexibility, who want the ability to say, June is crazy for my family, so I am not taking any contracts or extending into June. And, we can work with that. So, it gives you a little bit of flexibility. It also gives a lot of people the ability with postpartum work to navigate and create a schedule that works for their families, because you can either only take days or only take nights or only take weekends. The agency you're working for or the clients that you're attracting may not always want the schedule you're free for. And sometimes that means you lose out on a client, but there's always another client that's going to come along. And so you're really able to customize to an extent versus a traditional 9 to 5, got to be out of the house, get the kids to daycare kind of thing. So it can fit into a lot of families' lifestyles in a way that other traditional employment might not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that flexibility is incredible, because a lot of the doulas that we work with, they don't necessarily want to work full time, but I mean, honestly, in 2 to 3 nights, you can make a full-time minimum wage job earnings because we do pay better than minimum wage. So
all of our agencies pay a calculated living wage or better.
Yes. So, so, like you can make a decent amount of money every week by only working a few shifts. And if you've got a project or you're saving up for a home or something, you can commit to more. And the nature of doula work is that sometimes there's not a lot of work available, and sometimes there's a ton of work available, so you can ebb and flow with it. So there's always going to be these nice natural pauses where you get to take some time off, take some time for yourself. Or, like you can also commit to just working constantly if that's one thing that you need specifically for your family. Because I can tell you the reason why we set this up is I get so many requests for overnight support that our agency cannot fulfill, because we do not have enough people who will work or are able to work at night. So that it's a huge priority for us in terms of hiring. We need to be able to hire people who can and will work at night for us, and for the clients. And yeah, like all those things that Meaghan was talking about makes it so attractive. I love overnights. And if I did not have to run both this show as the producer and host, and I didn't have an agency to run on a day-to-day basis, I would do overnights 5 nights a week easily. And I have done that in the past with clients, when I did want to make a bit of more of a paycheck for myself. And when I did have maybe a smaller task list during the day, because I got nights to myself. And just me and a little baby. And and sometimes I had clients who would want to talk and needed support overnight, but that would be periodically. And when those moments of support were over, and then I had the quiet of the house, where I could wash some bottles, then go sit down, watch a movie while, keeping an eye on the baby on the monitor, or having the baby next to me in a bassinet in a living room or something. I can remember one client, it was a very brand new baby. I think she was 3 days old, and I had her wrapped in a swaddle and set up next to me on the sofa. She was lying on the sofa in one of those little cradle-y things. I don't know what they're called. Everyone has a different.
Moses baskets?
No, like the ones with the edge around them.
Oh, the like DockATots.
Yeah, like a DockATot. Just set up right beside me, my laptop on my knee, and I just, I built a whole bunch of administrative stuff that I had as my to-do list for work. And I just spent the whole night working, which was great. And then I got home, I slept for 4 or 5 hours. I, was able to do some more work, took a little nap, and I was good to go. So the great thing is you do get a lot of downtime overnight. So we have a question. Keisha Henry has said that she's interested, but there is a training involved, and she wants to talk about the fees. That is a great question. So thanks, Keisha, for bringing us there. Yes, there is a training. You have to be trained. You have to have the skills in order to do this right with parents. And if you're not a parent yourself, this is very important to make sure that you.
I actually think it's more important for the parents who are already parents. I will be honest. I think it's more important for people who have already learned one way of doing something.
Yes.
Because it's easy to be like, well, that worked with my baby. So I actually think training is more important if you've already had a baby of your own. I think even personally, the first postpartum training I took, there was a lot of things that I had to unlearn in a way.
You know what I learned? I was a parent who had their babies sleep in bed with me on whatever schedule they expressed on their own. And I learned how to put babies to bed on a schedule that, worked both with their own natural abilities and also the parents' desires, so that I could put a baby to sleep, which was something I couldn't necessarily do as a parent without using, my body to do that. And as a doula, I learned how to do that well. So a training is important. It is the next step to becoming a doula with our agency. Much the same as if you were a personal support worker, you really do need a certification that you have taken a training for that. The trainings come in a little under $1,000. I don't have the exact numbers. I want to say it's like $695 US, but the numbers may have changed slightly. And but the thing is, you can, if you're working with an agency, you will make that back in 1 to 2 paychecks easily. So
here's, I'll sort of to broaden it up. Leanne is talking about a specific training. In our agencies recommend the Pro Doula training. In our experience, the curriculum is sort of the most consistent across the board. So regardless of who trains our doulas, we know that they have the same foundation of knowledge. As well, the information is geared towards teaching new doulas to be a member of a team versus an advocate or an activist, as well as, in our experience, very sort of up-to-date and current evidence-based information. That being said, there are probably, some days it feels like as many doula training organizations as are doulas. And if you do a search, there's a whole lot that are going to come up. The ones I will say we see the most these days, Pro Doula, Doula Canada, and Bibo Mia tend to be the three that I see the most. Dona and Kappa as well, they're older. And I will be honest, I'm finding people are going to some of these more modern training organizations generally these days because there seems to be a bigger focus on diversity and business education and that sort of thing as well. So it's certainly not across the board, but I'm finding more and more of the people we speak to are taking those trainings.
Yeah.
As well as that, there is a college program now at 2 separate colleges in Ontario. I believe the 2 are Mohawk and Fanshawe. And so that is another pathway to birth and doula work that is opening up more. And I would say the Fanshawe program opened about 3 years ago. Mohawk, I think, opened 2 years ago. I can imagine that when the pandemic dies down, we are going to see more colleges pick up a program like this. And so that is going to be more of an option in the future, but it is an option now. So there's sort of a number of avenues to get to doula work. Trainings are different prices depending on the organization you're with. The one thing I always like to sort of caution people about is to look into all of the hidden fees that come along with certification in particular. So one of the reasons we recommend Pro Doula is your $695 at the beginning for your training, and then your membership fee, which is an annual fee, is it. There's no, there are some organizations where you pay to take your training, but then you have to pay to have your certification packet reviewed. And you have to buy 50 different books that you can prove that you read. And, you know, there comes a lot of hidden costs. And it's been a number of years since I did this. But about 6 years ago, I did a comparison chart, and I actually pulled all of the costs, and I went and looked up the books, and I did it all. And at the time, at least, Pro Doula came out to be about $400 Canadian cheaper compared to traditional and more well-known at the time training organizations. So really look into where you're going to be trained, or look into sort of the different costs associated with that organization. Most of them do have an annual membership fee that you need to pay in addition to the training. It's not typically a large fee, but it is there, and so be aware of that. The other thing that people should know, and I will say this until I am blue in the face because I am married to a litigation lawyer who works in insurance. The one other cost that I always tell people to budget for and be aware of is to have liability insurance. This is a cost that you can delay the same way you could delay printing of business cards or launching a website or any of that. This is something that you really, at the moment you're done your training, you should be getting your insurance in order so that you can very quickly go and support a family if that were to come up. So there are different costs associated with it. Now, depending on what your plans are post-training, and this is probably a good segue into what are your options as a doula. If you are working for an agency, as Leanne said, you are likely going to make that money back very, very quickly. Sometimes agencies also have a scholarship, loan, or subsidy program within their own company that can allow particularly qualified candidates to access a training that they might not otherwise be able to afford. Sometimes it's a scholarship, sometimes that is more of a payback, certain percentage over a period of time. So if financial limitations are the thing that is preventing you from getting a training and applying for a job, it is sometimes worth it to just send your information and send your resume and sell yourself. Tell the agency why you would make an amazing doula, so they see the value in investing in you as well. And I will say, I mean, we know a lot of the agency owners across the GTA. Obviously, we want everybody to come work for us, and we think we're amazing, but there are a lot of amazing agency owners in this city who really, truly treat their doulas and the people who work on their teams in a fabulous way. So, you know, it's not, we all know, especially this year, people have lost jobs, money is tight. It's hard to get into something new. I will say say everything adds up to about $1,200. It's probably not that much, but that's a nice round number. That is way less than a college program, than going back to school for something sort of more formalized. And it's a much faster period of time before you can get in front of clients and have some money coming in. Exactly. So, you know, it can feel overwhelming because it is a large chunk of change when you are looking at starting out, but it is an amount that is recoupable in a fairly quick period of time. Wow. There aren't as many sort of scholarships for doulas outside of agencies these days, I don't think, the way sometimes there are for midwifery programs and that kind of thing. But it's always worth looking into, particularly for doulas from marginalized communities. There are sometimes resources available in order to help diversify the field. So that is an excellent segue into, what does work look like? Who do you work for? What kinds of doulas there are out there? And there are sort of, I'll say, 4 categories. There are doulas who work for an agency, doulas who work with just a partner in a sort of small twosome or threesome situation, solo doulas, and then agency owners. Agency owners is probably a talk unto itself, because I could wax poetic for years, both the good, the bad, and the stressful. But for the other 3, solo doulas and small collectives of sort of partnership or 2 or 3 doulas are fairly similar in the way they work. They have their own website, they have their own social media, they have their own sort of policies and practices and contracts and all of that. Clients contract directly with them. The owner is who they get. And it's a much smaller operation. You don't have the stresses of multiple people in multiple places. You don't have, there's only so many clients you can take on at a time. So there's often a lot less back end work. That being said, all of the back end work is on you. So all of the invoicing, all of the contracts, all of the follow-ups, all of the social media, it all lands on your plate. And that can be really overwhelming for people who just want to go snuggle a baby and talk a new parent through new parenthood. So this is where agencies come in, and this is where agency doulas often find the best of all worlds, where they get to, sort of be sent to clients. And in a lot of cases, especially for postpartum, the doulas are already hired when they walk in the door. This isn't an interview. This isn't like a one-off. Like, you go in with a schedule and you know what you're going to work. So, they get to go in, they get to do the best parts of the job, and they don't have to worry about if invoices were sent out or if payroll was done, or, if there are follow-up phone calls that need to happen. So they can just focus on the piece of being the doula. Obviously, we think that working for an agency is a fabulous option. I will say I've worked as both, so has Leanne. I've worked as a solo doula, I've worked in a partnership, and I've worked in an agency as an owner. I will be honest, I never worked as an agency doula, but I've been an owner and still an owner. And I will never go back to solo doula work, particularly on the birth side, but even on the postpartum side. The reality is, people get migraines or a cold, or, have something happen in their family, and having a partner, having another doula, having a team behind you, even if it's not a team you see all the time, like there's no water cooler to congregate around, but you have a team at your back. There's also times where, as a doula, we've all gotten into situations where we're a little bit over our head. A client who is having a crisis and we don't know what the next step is. A baby who's really sick and needs to, things happen, and having a team to go back to, not just for resources and suggestions and ideas when you sort of run out of your bag of tricks, but also to debrief with and talk through and really feel like you can process some of the things that we see. Because as wonderful as this job is, sometimes we see some things that might make us question or feel weird, or we need to talk through. It's certainly not every day, especially on the postpartum side. There's a lot less processing, I think, as a doula on the postpartum side, because it's not necessarily as dramatic as crisis as it can be in a birthing suite. But we really get to work as a team and reach out to our teammates to talk about things. You also have agency owners who, I know that Leanne and I and all four of us who are part of this management team love the mentorship part. And that's something that you don't get as below you, or you have to switch it out in a different way. But within an agency, one of the things that we love is being able to mentor new doulas. As we said, make this a sustainable career. Part of that sustainability for us is working as part of a team, so that if you need, the Friday off because it's your husband's birthday and you want to do something special for him, you can take Friday off and you're not, losing a client or whatever. You have another doula on your team who can step in and be there for you. So those are sort of the three situations for doulas that we see the most often.
We've got another question from Gigi. Are doulas independent contractors or are they employees? So while there are a lot of agencies, and some agencies may be set up to have employee doulas, we are set up to have independent contractors, which we believe is kind of the best of both worlds. You, as an independent contractor, you can decide whether you want to work or not. You can just take off time whenever you want to. You can decline clients whenever you want to. You can decide in the middle of a contract, these clients, I don't feel great with them, and I would really love to be swapped out with someone else. Whereas as an employee, right, you get assigned work and you have to do the work. You have to do the work using all of your own or your employer's equipment, their own very specific ways of doing things. You don't have very much leeway. Whereas as an independent contractor, you do get that leeway, which is really good. You also have the option of taking your own clients. So all of the doulas in our agency, from time to time, have their own private clients that they work with. And when they do, they merely tell us, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up that I have a birth client. She is due during this chunk of time. So don't book me in for anything, or don't offer me anything until, like a month from then, or whatever the situation might be. They get to, or you get to decide that for yourself.
And to build on that, it also gives people a bit more flexibility now. And this is a totally agency to agency thing on how they deal with it. So we can only speak to how we deal with it. When you're an employee, you may run into, particularly, I'm going to pretend COVID is over. If you want to work as both a birth doula and a postpartum doula, this is where employees, we can run into sticky situations of, you get called to a birth today and the birth runs long. You're there for 36 hours. You don't get home until, later in the evening, I guess on Saturday. And but you've now worked 36 hours. If you had already on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday worked 10-hour overnight shifts, we're now at 66 hours. And if you're scheduled for another 30 hours of postpartum with your client on the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when you've had time to recover, we would have to actually pull that person off of that contract, because we can't pass on overtime to a client who had nothing to do with the birth. And so we then end up actually having to limit what people can do, limit the roles doulas can take, the types of clients they can take and how many they can take, versus the doulas being able to say, no, I know that if I'm on call, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I get called into a birth, I'm fine to go to my shift, Monday overnight. I can't, as an independent contractor, individuals get to make that decision for themselves versus me being restricted by what I, as an employer, would be allowed to do. It's not perfect. It means that certain things like EI and benefits become much more complicated. We realize that there are limitations to the independent contractor model. It's just been such a tricky situation to try and figure out other ways to deal with it. Some of the other perks in being an independent contractor are that a lot of the things that you use will now be tax deductible. Your phone is tax deductible, your internet is tax deductible, your car and your parking and your gas and your maintenance, all of that now, because you are independently employed, all of those now are things that you save your receipts for, and you can use that on your taxes. So there are some perks. There are definitely downsides. I'm not going to pretend it's a perfect system. But in the 8 to 10 years that we've all been doing this as agency owners, it has been the system that we have found works the best. And that's not just us. That has been a lot of the owners we have talked to across the board. So
yeah, sure.
Pros and cons, just like there are to everything.
Absolutely. So if people are thinking, hey, this sounds like a good idea, what's the next step? Meaghan, what should they do?
So first thing you are going to do is figure out where you want to work. Depending on your agency. So just a reminder, all 3 of our agencies are hiring. They are located in Hamilton, in Toronto, and in Ottawa. Now, Leanne, you know me in geography, so you're going to tell the boundaries for Hamilton. Ottawa does serve the Ottawa-Gatineau region, assuming we're allowed to cross the Quebec border, which at the moment we are, but COVID. So that is the region that area serves. We do occasionally get requests outside of that. Usually in those situations, it's always the agreement of the doula, and there are sometimes travel stipends. It depends on the situation. Toronto, we serve the entire GTA minus what Hamilton serves on the west end. We don't typically have a lot of Durham clients. We do have a lot of Richmond Hill, Thornhill, Newmarket area, so just north of the city. So that is a benefit if you either live in those areas or have a car. It's not a requirement to have a car, but it does certainly make west and north end clients easier for a lot of our doulas who have them. And then Leanne, you can tell Hamilton's boundaries, because if you work for me, you will find out that my geography is awful.
Yeah. So for Hamilton, we have a pretty big area as well. We're going from just inside Niagara County a little bit in the Grimsby area up around the greater Hamilton area. That would be like Binbrook. We're capturing Caledonia as well. We go up to close to Cambridge, and we go as far as Mississauga. So Mississauga, that's where Toronto Family Doulas takes over. But we have had clients up to the border between Oakville and Mississauga. So yeah, it's a pretty huge area. The most of our clients, though, we find in Grimsby, Stony Creek, Hamilton, Dundas, Burlington, and Ancaster. Those areas are where all of our clients are generally located. So it does benefit to be able to access a vehicle, especially because in an overnight situation, you may be arriving at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and you may be leaving at 6, 7, 8, 9 in the morning. So it's easier. And I can tell you, as someone, I don't drive. And when I'm doing overnights, I often take an Uber or a Lyft. And there are some areas where it's difficult to get an Uber or a Lyft out to at 6 or 7 in the morning. So you just want to be mindful about something like that. That is definitely a consideration. It does make it easier because, if you're in downtown Hamilton, maybe, and have a client out in Grimsby, that's potentially a 20 to 30 minute drive for you, which is a lot easier than trying to figure out an alternate or having to turn down work that's outside of the core of the city.
So once you assuming everybody knows where they live. Once you know which agency you are applying to, the process is fairly similar across the board. Leanne is going to post a link for any Hamilton applications in the comments, and that's a place to just do it very quickly. You can also find all 3 agencies have job ads up on Indeed currently. If you just want to go straight to the source and you're looking at Toronto or Ottawa, just send us your resume and we turn a letter of intent. I want a cover letter saying like, I have all of these professional skills and when I was in yearbook, like whatever. We want to know what makes you a great doula. We want to know why you think this is the career for you. Tell us why you're passionate about working with families and babies. When I read a letter of intent, I want to walk away from it feeling like I have an idea of who this person is. Because at the end of the day, like I emphasized earlier, the personality and the innate skills is what we can't train. I don't care if you know how to swaddle a baby. I can teach you how to swaddle a baby. I can't teach you how to listen well. So, we really want people to give this letter with a good indication of who you are as a person. Now, I am not going to require anyone to do this, and I'm not forcing anybody, but I will tell you that people who choose to send me a 2 to 5 minute video about who they are as a person, more than ever, instead of a cover letter, go right to the top of my higher pipe. I want to see faces. I want to see body language. I want to watch a video and say, oh yeah, if I was a client, this person would be awesome. So people who send videos, I'm just going to throw out there that they get priority when it comes to looking at resumes. And if you want to send us a video file and you are having trouble, this has been a thing we've dealt with in the past, shoot us an email and we will find a solution for it. Often the solution is a WhatsApp message to send it, but it depends on the situation. So, if you want to send a video and you're having troubles getting the file through, just a quick email and we'll troubleshoot with you. In addition to the video, though, we do still want a resume. If you send a letter of intent, also send your resume. If you're applying in Toronto, you send it to hiring@torontofamilydoulas.com. If you are sending it to Ottawa, you send it to hello@familydoulas.ottawa.com. So those are sort of the places. Leanne has put the link up for Hamilton. Once we have applications, we do often send out a list of questions. Leanne, I think yours is all integrated. I'm not that organized quite yet. Leanne's is all integrated. If you're applying to the other 2 agencies, you will be sent a list of questions once we've received and reviewed your application. And those questions are really sort of, you're not meant to have a right or wrong answer. It's really us trying to get a feel for philosophy of care and philosophy around things like scope of practice. So it's okay if you don't have perfect answers. Sometimes we look at things and we go, oh, that's clearly just something you haven't been taught yet. Okay, so we know that that's something we in our orientations need to cover a little bit better. So it's not that you're going to be excluded or precluded because of your answers. It's really just to give us an idea where people are at. And then from there, we will schedule interviews with the candidates that we would like to meet with. Once we have everybody that we're planning to hire and we know where we are in terms of who is trained, who is not, who needs a training, that's when we will work with the group of new doulas. And because everything right now is virtual, all 3 agencies will probably end up in the same training together, which is new and actually kind of fun. I almost want to see that training because that actually kind of sounds like a lot of fun and it's not something I normally get to do. So we'll organize the training and set that up for everybody.
My hair, sorry. I'm living in opposite world. My hair is driving.
So once the training is sometime between officially offering you a job and you working with your first client, usually, we will sit down and do an orientation with you that goes through our independent contractor manual, which has all of the basics, how to submit your invoices, how to check our back-end systems, what's expected of you, and sort of everything else. But we also go through all of those systems with you so that everybody is on the same page before they go to their first client. I say almost always we do an orientation because all 3 agencies have sent a doula directly from a training to an overnight shift at least once. So sometimes we run into emergencies during a training, and people literally leave their training and they pick up dinner on their way and they go straight to an overnight shift, and they really get sort of thrown into the mix. It has happened. It doesn't happen every time, but it is certainly something we have all seen. So sometimes people end up on a contract or with a client before an orientation has happened. In those scenarios, there's a little bit more grace about how you post your shift notes, that sort of thing, and we will do an orientation as quickly as possible. And then once you're one of our doulas, you're one of our doulas, and you get to be with us as long as you want to be. But we work with our doulas to make sure we understand what their needs are in terms of work and how much work, and we do our best always to fulfill that for all of our doulas. And we have all been shoulder to cry on, and wisdom advice giver and everything else for a lot of our doulas on our teams who are really looking for someone to learn from and grow from. So the question, Leanne?
Nadine Sowerby asked, is it okay to apply before you finished your certification? And yes. In fact, working through an agency is one of the best ways to fast track your certification, because you can often get far more clients than you could if you just sort of started being your own independent doula. But by all means, like you can work with your own clients, but we often are able to get people working quite quickly. I always give a caveat to people that while like we're doing this because we need doulas. However, the caveat is I can never guarantee any particular level of work to anyone just because of the nature of the job. And this year in the pandemic, we went through a long stretch where no families were interested in having people outside of their immediate family step into their home. And that is understandable. So the level of work can fluctuate. However, it's like the stock market. Sometimes it goes down, but it always goes back up. And it always overachieves over its previous positions. So like for doula work, we always need people to do work with families. That's just not going to change. We have a number of doulas presently, but their life circumstances change as well. So it's fine if you become a doula and then in a year go, oh, we're going to move because we've decided to buy a farm out of the area. That's happened. We've had doulas who went on to become midwives. We've had doulas who went on to start their own agencies and their focus on their own independent businesses. And we're so excited that we were able to help them get a great, strong, solid start. That's why we call ourselves Hamilton Family Doulas, Family Doulas of Ottawa, and Toronto Family Doulas, because we see this as a small family. We nurture our doulas. We try to do everything we can to help you get the skills you need to be amazing, to further your skills, and to find a level of work for you that is deeply satisfying and fulfills your needs.
And I do want to touch on one thing just because it is so relevant to everybody right now. Obviously, COVID has upended everybody's life. And just for full disclosure, in the beginning, when the original lockdown occurred and everything really shut down, doulas were not allowed to work. And so all three of our agencies are committed to following both the law and public health guidelines. And we did shut down for that period. Doulas was it phase 1 or phase 2? I can't remember. We were allowed to reopen around June. We as agencies took a little bit longer than that because we wanted to make sure we had adequate protocols and policies in place to keep our doulas and our clients as safe as possible. So we took a little bit of extra time to make sure that we had all of our ducks in a row. And then we did resume offering services. With the most recent sort of shutdowns and phased openings and all of that, from what we can tell, doulas are unlikely to be included in a lockdown again. I think there is a recognition from the government that certain services like childcare and in-home support are maybe not essential, but are extremely important for the continuing functioning of families and society. And so we have been allowed, and we are back to working and have been working since June. Obviously, if things went totally pear-shaped again and everything shut down, there is a likelihood that doulas would be included. But at this point in time, it does not seem like we are going to be included again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing. So we are back in people's homes right now. We have doulas who are working in families' homes, providing very needful support. And we have found ways to do that very safely with masks. So I know for our agency, we have masks available, reusable masks available to our doulas from the agency. And and we have ongoing learning around all that stuff as well that we offer periodically to make sure everyone's on the same page and doing the best that they can do.
For sure. Were there any more questions? We'll give everybody a minute, anybody who's watching, to sort of pop back in.
One thing I also want to point out that while we don't require any specific training, as Meaghan talked about earlier, we do have certain recommendations of trainings that we have a lot of confidence in. But if you're already trained, you don't need to worry about what your specific training organization is, as long as you have a training. Or if you're certified, amazing. If you're not certified yet, you can work on your certification. And if you need a training, if you're looking for a training, you want to talk to us about that. I believe we're going to be having a training within the next 2 weeks, and which means that if you're currently not trained, you think this could be a fantastic job for you, or a career, or a temporary measure to get work while your normal avenues of work are largely shut down, you can potentially be working within the next 3 weeks to a month and pulling in a paycheck. So I think I just want to make sure that that's clear for folks, so that there's a clear pathway to getting money in your pocket. And as an agency owner, that's super important to me. Like that, I feel like as a female agency owner working with families, I consider it a sacred duty to that I'm performing, giving other people work, especially in these really difficult times. I don't take that lightly. I work really hard to try to get the work to people, because I'm a big believer in small businesses and, just all the good things that they bring. So,
well, and this, Leanne, it comes back to what we were saying before, that you and I both have really stepped back from a lot of direct client work, because nowadays our job is getting work for our team and our doulas. So really our role has shifted in a way. Our problem solving is no longer in a home. Our problem solving is making sure that we have enough doulas and we have the right doulas on our team to go in and be with our clients. And I will say, as a business owner and an agency owner in particular, when you work for an agency, know that you are there because the owners feel confident that you can represent them. Leanne has been in this business we both have been. I am 6 years into owning an agency, and I will tell you, I still clutch a little bit every time I send somebody out, because I'm like, but this agency is my baby. And so, when an agency owner hires you, it really is a vote of confidence in your abilities and in who you are as a person, because we are sending you out as our representatives. So that's really sort of what we are looking for, is people we can send out with confidence. Leanne, you've got this look on your face like there's a question.
There is a question.
See, body language.
That's a really interesting question, and this one's a little challenging. Are the doulas able to work other jobs. So as we said, when you're a doula, when you're an independent contractor, the only thing that we can control on our end is we make recommendations, and we're trying to keep all of our doulas working with one family at a time within our agency. But if you have your own clients, if you have another job that you do, maybe you're a PSW, and so you do have maybe a couple of regular clients that you go to see on a daily basis or a weekly basis. What we are expecting from people is that you're taking the appropriate precautions, because we don't want folks bringing potential infections into the families that we're working with. And we certainly don't want that for the people that you work with in your own job, in your life. So we can't make any rules around preventing you from working, like how you work, and other work that you're doing. We can only really make recommendations about what's going on within our own agency. And within our own agency, we're trying really hard to keep the doulas who are working with the clients to only be working with those clients until they have that contract is completed. So you wouldn't be necessarily going from one family's house one night to another family's house the next night. But you might be going from one family across 3 weeks, and then the next week you move on to a new client, a new family. So
I will say some of our agencies do have a restriction on working for other doula agencies. And that is purely a real talk. We've had situations in the past where the same doula has showed up to an interview with clients as a representative of two different agencies. So there's just a logistical consideration if doulas are working for multiple agencies that can sometimes get a little complicated. But private clients, non-doula work, any of that is absolutely allowed and encouraged. We want our doulas and our teams to be happy. We want them to be fulfilled. And for some people, doula work is only a part of that fulfillment in their life. And we support our doulas in working the amount of doula work that makes them happiest. Sometimes we wish you could work more because we, amazing doulas, all the clients want them, but we try to be respectful of everybody's limitations around.
Absolutely. So unless there are other questions about to come in, I think we're going to wrap up. I want to thank you all for joining us on our very special episode of Birth and Baby Talk this week. And if you have any further questions, by all means, you can leave them directly in the comments. I get those notifications and I will answer them as fast as possible. You can also reach out to us directly at any of the agencies by emailing hello at Hamilton Family Doulas, hello at Family Doulas of Ottawa, or hiring at Toronto Family Doulas. And you'll be able to get those questions answered directly that way as well.
I will say, please don't send questions to Instagram messages or Facebook messages, because as much as we get those notifications, especially Facebook messages on mobile for businesses, can be really hard to access, and we don't want to miss your questions. So the best places to reach us truly are the comments on this video or by emailing the agency you're interested in directly. No social media messages, please. I always feel bad, and 6 months later I find it, I'm like, I just ignored you. We don't know.
And then Facebook is really mean, and they say this person gets back to you within days. And I'm like, I would have gotten back within moments if I'd known it came in.
Yeah.
It's weird. We don't get the notifications correctly. But thanks again, folks. Again, come back. If you want to learn more about the world of birth, pregnancy, birth, and babies, we'd love for you to like Birth and Baby Talk here on Facebook, follow us, and come back on Wednesdays at noon when we do our regular show. This week, we will be talking with Meaghan. Meaghan and I will be here again, and we'll be talking about oxytocin, the love hormone.
And just a quick note, if you are interested, but you also know people who might be interested, please share this video with them. We want this to go to anybody who would be a good candidate, not just for us, but really to join the doula community in general. As much as we are doing this because all of our agencies need to hire, we also truly believe in creating a positive, sustainable, evidence-based doula community in Ontario. And so even if you are not in a place where you can apply for our agencies, but you want to become a doula, please reach out and let us know so that we can keep you on board of any upcoming trainings or anything like that. And we will help you in that way as well.
Thanks again, folks. Lovely to meet you all. We look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.